Today's guest is an influencer, blogger, and filmmaker who is incredibly passionate about content creation, and she just loves helping others learn too. One of the key moments in this episode is when she reminds us that the creator economy is not just some get-rich-quick scheme, rather a powerful path for the rest of your life. We talk about figuring out who your audience is, showing up authentically, a few tricks for making social media sustainable, and how when you do this the right way, opportunities will just start coming to you. She shares the incredible story of how she got started in the space, the mindset shift that she had to make, and how it's all coming together beautifully. Please welcome to JKL, Kaya, aka Comfy Girl Curls. I'm super excited to have you on the show today. Every time I get ready for an episode, it's like each episode I get more and more excited because maybe I get a little bit better as an interviewer, but I also feel more aligned as a content creator. And one of the things that I love doing is kind of mixing up the first question these days. And I would love to know from you, either as a consumer, a creator, or both, what you think makes a great podcast episode.
I would say as a consumer, I know that I am in deep for a podcast when I stop doing whatever I told myself I was supposed to be multitasking. When I have to sit down at a table and like pull out a pen and paper to like start taking notes. And yeah, whatever the story is that I've just been totally sucked in.
It's that capturing of your attention.
Yes. Yeah. It's no longer a passive activity.
Do you like storytelling, or do you like how-tos, or do you kind of mix it up?
I definitely do how-tos, but for me, it's the storytelling that sucks me in, unless I'm just super, super into the topic or the subject matter. But yeah, there needs to be a story attached to the how-to for me to want to listen to it in podcast form, rather than me just quickly going to Google it or figure it out on YouTube or something.
Do you remember what the first podcast you listened to was?
Yes, and I guess it's not obscure in the sense that it's still tied to being a creator, but it's called the Write or Die podcast because I have a secondary passion for writing and pursuing published authorship one day. And so it's a podcast about the traditional publishing world.
That's interesting. So like, this is what's so cool about podcasting to me. And perhaps one part of my answer would be learning things that I didn't expect to learn because the writing aspect of the career, like I know it's something that you've talked a little bit about, but the fact that you say one day is really standing out to me because I made a note in my like content ideas folder on my phone today, and it said that if you start writing, then you are a writer, and wanting to post to, people that are the aspiring authors or someday authors, that like, if you're a writer, you're a writer. And in your case, you are a blogger, so you're a writer. But are you saying that you want to create a nonfiction, like traditional book, a fiction series? Like, what is that?
For me, it's actually fiction. My original dream career path before I fell into content creating was to be a young adult fantasy fiction writer. And I actually technically have done it. I have both written my own and co-authored something, and we've submitted it to agents and have kind of done that whole dance. So nothing came of it, but we'll see. One day maybe.
That's really cool. We are at the risk of getting super sidetracked, but
I'm like ready.
I'll add something to that it's another fellow creator friend who's going to be coming on the show soon. We're just kind of working out dates, but she goes by the handle voiceover superhero. I hope I'm getting that right. I'll have to double check, but she creates voiceovers, and we've been talking like the odd DM every 3 months for about 2 years now about creating like YA fiction story, but then taking the script and posting it as like audio only. And obviously it could be a like you could just print it out someday or whatever, but trying to like submit it to the Com app and feeling like there's a pretty big gap in, I guess you could say, marketplace, to use a business term, around creating that same kind of content, but the audio version of it. So we're pretty aligned there.
That's an incredible idea. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was laughing, because the thing we were talking about was category pirates. I don't know if you follow Nicholas Cole and Dickie Bush's work at all, but they are part of a group called Category Pirates. I believe Chris Lockheed's part of it, and there's a female or two as well, but there's about 5 or 6 people, and they co-author like an entire, like they have a ton. They have like 40 books that they've co-authored, and they consider themselves like a music band for writing.
I love that.
And that inspired me. I was like, you know what? We're all pretty busy. With like the ability to automate things and communicate these days, can we do something collaboratively? And so, yeah, it was her and her sister and then myself, and we were like, okay, let's work on this someday. And then honestly, I would guess everyone's too busy to an extent, but it'd be a fun idea. So I definitely would love to hear more about writing as well. But before we get too far from podcasting, we tackled what it means to you to hear a great podcast. When it comes to creating, what do you like to talk about? And do you like to tell stories? Do you really like to teach in bullet point? Like, what does if we make the best podcast you've ever been on today, what do you think we will have done to achieve that?
I truly believe that people will hopefully leave with some bullet points, like they have their key takeaways, but the overarching thing is I like people to hopefully see themselves in my journey and in my story. So I loved being able to share how I was able to get to where I am, how I see success or measure success, and hopefully inspire people to be able to create their own content, tell their own stories online as well.
That's beautiful. And that kind of is a perfect time to mention that your featured YouTube video, at least right now, is how I made 70K as a small influencer last year, something to that effect.
Yes.
That is a great title. It's an awesome video too, so everyone should go watch the video itself. I also feel like it's a really solid structure for the audience in terms of people having questions because they maybe want to get started. They don't think it's possible. They see a title like that and they want to go a little deeper on how that's possible. So that's a perfect kind of framework, I guess, for our conversation today. So if you were just to, as hard as it is, summarize that video for people, like take us back to becoming that successful, or let's say full-time creator.
Absolutely. So to sum it up, I always first like to preface it with saying I started as a blogger 7, almost 8 years ago today. And so it's a long process. I like to emphasize that making money as a creator is not this get-rich-quick scheme. And things really changed for me when I changed my mindset from, okay, this is a fun hobby and maybe it's going to make me money one day, to this is a business. I am going to sit down and make income and expense spreadsheets. I'm going to make a list of the different ways I can monetize this thing, and I'm going to put action behind those lists and those plans. And the moment I started approaching content that way, I noticed I just started naturally showing up differently online. I was more intentional with the content I was posting. I was more aligned with my niche and my audience. The quality went up. And from there, I naturally just started attracting more brand deals. The irony of me sitting down and planning to make this big pitch list to pitch brands was that I actually never really had to pitch much, because the moment I started showing up for myself and my content, the brands started reaching out to me. And from there, it was me trying to navigate, how can I make more money out of this? How can I negotiate these brand deals? How can I continue to make this sustainable? And that's where it kind of grew to the point where I was able to replace my day job's income and get the confidence to take this thing full time.
Was that experience like? Were you crying, like jumping up and down, or were you super scared? Combination of all of them. Like when you made that shift to full time, was it, I guess, let me ask as well for clarity's sake, was it like a gradual step down, or were you able to say, okay, no, I'm going for it now, so I'm going full time? And then like, what was that experience like?
So it was kind of a combo where I told my boss when I made the decision, but I gave 6 months notice. So it was a long sort of mental process of sort of gradually accepting that this thing was coming. I describe it often as a calculated risk. So again, I had known that I had been able to make that much money. I'd proven to myself that I could do it. I was implementing some more income streams behind the scenes. And so it was a very, I don't want to say slow process or relaxed process, but I was relatively calm throughout it. The lead up, of course, was exciting, but I don't think I was particularly nervous or panicked about it. It did feel kind of surreal that I was leaving this really stable life. But the panic sort of hit me on the other side, like once I actually quit and I had all of this free time and I had to work fully on my own schedule. I had to manage my own time. That was all very new for me and was very difficult. And I started to think like, oh, what if everything was a fluke and I made a mistake? But that turned out to just be the adjustment period and me not being used to managing my own time in that way.
I think as an outsider looking in, it seems like everything's gone pretty awesome. And for me, if I actually heard a good quote a couple of days ago, something to the effect of there's like a possibility for 7 billion monopolies in this world. Sadly, the math on that's probably wrong because a lot of people, don't even have access to water and internet and these sorts of things that are, quite unfortunate. But the idea is basically that every person could own their own business and brand over the next 25 50 years. Like the world's kind of heading in that direction in many ways. So it really excites me, and like I celebrate for people that I hardly know, because I know how many youth specifically I've worked with who want to start podcasts, want to start blogs, want to start YouTube channels, and they just don't know where to begin, and they could just like spin their tires trying for 10 15 20 years. Of course these things take time, but with a little bit of that behind the scenes and mentorship, and there are legitimately some cheat codes that people have helped me with. I know people have helped you, I'm sure. So when you bring up the idea of, you mentioned that they're starting to build some revenue streams behind the scenes or on the side. So what were the ways that you were able to start making some progress in that way?
For me, so the income streams that I was exploring was, of course, brand deals was my bulk. Like that was the big income source that drove me to be able to quit my job. But I wanted to have a bit more controllables in my pocket. So I started focusing some more on affiliate marketing. I'm still a traditional blogger, so I love creating like SEO posts and all of that nerdy stuff and plugging some affiliate links in there so I could get commission on any products that I refer people to. I started developing some of my own digital products. I love Pinterest, so I worked to create some starter guides for people to figure out how to navigate that platform. And I also started offering some one-on-one calls, more like consulting versus full-on coaching for anybody who wanted to pick my brain on navigating brand deals or anything like that. And honestly, in terms of starting any of those, I am such a research nerd, so that was kind of my first step, is straight to the internet, trying to figure out what the best path is. I know that no matter what I'm trying to start, somebody else has done it better and quicker than I have, and very likely has graciously shared their knowledge online somewhere. So that's usually my first stop. And second is leaning into my community, because the beautiful thing about this crazy online career that we have is that we have these connections all around the world. And same sort of thing, we're likely to know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody who has done the thing that we are trying to do. Or even if that degree of separation extends even further, so many people are open to you building rapport with them on like Twitter or LinkedIn, and then, sliding into their DMs very ethically and kindly and not demanding of their time, of course. But I just think that there's just so much opportunity to learn from other people. And I feel like that's kind of what I've done for every kind of income source. Even when I look at brand deals, I credit each level up in my career to my community or the people around me. Like the first time I realized that my rates were probably too low is because one of my new Instagram friends was like, yo, you gotta up it. Like, what are you doing? They're taking advantage of you. And like when I learned how to focus more on my blog, same thing. It was some of the bloggers in the space that I looked up to. So yeah.
If someone's listening, she's just started posting her photography content on her blog, and she's like a photographer by trade, but she wants to do brand deals. She has 5,000 people following her Instagram. Of course, brand deals are a little bit relative to a bunch of factors, but is there any sort of framework or way that someone listening like that would know how to price things?
Yeah, so the one thing about pricing is I always say it is unfortunately the Wild West. I think even to this day, I'll talk to people with the same following count as me, and some people are charging way more than I am, and some are like, I haven't even got $1 from this thing. What's going on? And what I usually tell people is at the very minimum, you just have to pick a number. Like choosing a number is where you start and you analyze the feedback from that point on. So I usually say if the brand is not haggling you on your number, it's too low. So, you do what you can, you do that brand deal, but the next time you know that you're going to try to raise it. Maybe you're bumping it $50, maybe you're bumping it $100, but you're going to test the waters the next time around with a higher rate. And it kind of goes the other way too, where if a brand is just, you're not getting any bites, they don't even want to negotiate with you, your number's too high, then you can say, okay, maybe we're going to start a little bit lower the next time around or in that negotiation. I usually don't recommend people leverage a lot of like the rate calculators that are out there. I think that's kind of the first thing a lot of us do is we go to Google and we're like, how much can I charge for this many followers? And a bunch of calculators will pop up. That being said, if it's your very first brand deal ever, don't be afraid to start with that number and take note of how a brand is responding to it, and do not be afraid to bump it up the next time around, the next time around, the next time around. I often say that by the time a creator has the confidence to raise their rates, it's already too low. Like they should have raised it several times back over.
Yeah, you hear that a lot in the public speaking world as well, the same idea, or coaching, I suppose. A lot of things is kind of like that. One of the things that's really interesting, and I'm sure was possibly part of why your rates were so low at the beginning as well, is a lot of the audience that I can picture right now are really mapping the idea of a rate to an hourly wage. And I know that one of the things for me first getting into online business was the idea of trying to separate our rates from time. And that is very foreign to people. They could even listen to this entire episode and then still have to kind of figure out what that looks like for themselves. So instead of trying to figure out and help people with, you should charge, X number of dollars, what about how it compares to like deliverables? So when, in your case, when you say brand deals, are you shooting a YouTube video, embedding some product? And how long does it take you, I guess, to do most of the brand deals that you do?
Yeah, so most of my brand deals, I would say 90% are Instagram, some are TikTok. Every so often I'll get like a blog or YouTube placement, but I'm definitely a social media first creator. And when I'm evaluating my pricing, I look at usually if it's probably going to be like an Instagram reel or a TikTok. Like it's usually going to be a short form type of content, maybe some stories. And I look at how long it takes me, which, like you said, I think you perfectly said it, that we get really fixated on just that one point. Like, how long is it going to take me? And for me as a hair creator, so I started as a natural hair creator, and that content is a lot more time consuming to create than, say, somebody who just needs to like put on a bit of skincare. I've done skincare posts too, but those are pretty quick. So sometimes mine are several days over. But let me come back and make it a little more succinct. There's a direction I was trying to go with that. My apologies.
It's all good. I can tell a story while you're thinking.
Sure, let's do it.
I was on a podcast called the Present Fathers Podcast. It's gotten pretty big recently because of like maybe how niche it is, and they kind of want to, be very supportive of like there's a lot of absent fathers. So like how can we come together as a community, support, men's mental health, these kinds of things. So they're interviewing dads basically, and they talk about dad stuff. And I had like the first panic attack kind of starting that I've had since I was like a teenager. And I told him, I was like, what's so crazy is right now, if you look back on this episode, and I was like, how meta is this? I haven't had a podcast, haven't had a panic attack in 20 years. And I was like, like when you see those news reporters that like go blank because they're kind of having like some kind of like weird moment. It was like that, but it was just saying it was like extreme anxiety that flooded me for like 2 seconds. And I remember just like losing my train of thought. And then instead of trying to remember what I was thinking of, I was like, I just told him straight up. I was like, you just witnessed like the beginning of a panic attack moment.
Wow.
And I haven't had that happen in like 20 years, but what better moment to shift the conversation to talking about anxiety and stuff like that
health.
than on this show right here, right now. Maybe that happened for a reason. But anyways, that's a whole side note.
No, that's so crazy and like so accurate. Like what things happen for a reason. Things happen for a reason.
It's true. So when making the brand deals, like how long it kind of takes you, is that the way that you determine what to charge, and what does that look like? So I guess you already said that it's for you, it's mostly Instagram.
Yes. Where I was trying to go with it is that I think it really varies. I think when I started creating content, I really was fixated on that hourly rate, which kind of to your point, kept it really low, because if I could charge $100 for a reel that maybe took me a couple hours to shoot and edit, if it was like a beauty look, or maybe even if it was a couple days washing my hair and styling my hair, but I was going to be washing and styling my hair anyways, like that just seemed like such an incredible deal. I could be like, wow, this is $50 an hour. What a steal. But as time has gone on, I have really shifted my perception of my rates more into the value that the brand's getting out of it. That's how I am evaluating my number. So I love talking money. I love being really candid about it. My rate might change by the time this comes out, but right now I charge anywhere between like $1,000 to $1,500 for a reel. Just a nice short form video, and sometimes that truly does just take me a couple hours to shoot. But in setting that number, I am taking into account the audience that I am giving the brand access to. I am, yes, evaluating my time, but my time isn't just shooting the content and editing it. I am the talent, I am the makeup artist, the stylist, I am drafting the concept and submitting that. There's so much extra work that goes into it versus just the hourly rate that we are working or shooting in front of the camera and editing. And I also take into account I guess on top, So on top of that number too, I guess I take into account extra things like exclusivity. Is the brand asking me to not work with competitors? Are they planning to use this content on their website? Are they going to run ads behind it? Is it going to deliver them an ongoing profit after I have created it and posted it on my account? And all of those things can actually work to bump the number up even higher. So I think that it really comes down to so much more than just that time it takes us to create.
Would you say that's the number one thing that you wish you'd known sooner, or was there something else that you wish you'd known sooner?
I think it's definitely the usage rights part of that equation, because I have found myself in situations where I didn't even realize that I had signed away rights to my content and it was benefiting the brand for months down the line, and I had kind of only charged them a couple $100s for it. Meanwhile, they're pumping, who knows, they could be pumping thousands of dollars in the background to have it reach millions of people. Actually, I have had content reach millions of people simply because the brand was pushing it. They're putting the money behind it, and I wasn't getting even like a sliver of that income. So that was something I wish I knew right out the gate.
Putting percentages on it in perpetuity, or is it having like a shelf life to how long they can use it, or is it a combination of those things?
For me, I always give a shelf life. I have never willingly, now that I know and have learned my lesson, signed away perpetuity for a couple of reasons. One, yes, there's that monetary aspect where the brand can keep using it and I'm not getting compensated. But also, we don't know what the brand's going to look like down the line. They might make some iffy decisions that no longer align with my values. And I don't like the idea of them having the rights to post me in a time of crisis saying like, oh, look, these influencers love our products. We're still reliable. Meanwhile, this is something I posted like 6 years ago. So yeah, that's definitely one I do not sign.
Right. When you mentioned the idea of starting to make your list, but then the irony being that once you made the list and decided the brands you wanted to work with, all of a sudden you had to do that less. That makes complete sense to me on so many levels. Do you remember some of the brands that were on that original list? And more importantly, for people who we would advise probably go make your list as well, like what should people think about when they're making their list?
Yeah. So when I made my list, there are brands that I have now had the absolute privilege to work with just by, sheer who knows what, the universe. It all worked out. Maybe I put it out there. But when I sat down to make the list, I was really thinking about what products am I currently using? What tools am I currently using? What do I already recommend to my audience organically? It wasn't just this like wish list of, oh, this brand's super cool and like, wouldn't it be a dream to work with them? It was truly me going into my bathroom, looking at my product shelf and making a list of everything that I used and loved and had purchased with my own money. And I actually also had put a lot of small businesses on my list, because something I say a lot to creators is that we are small businesses too. And I think that when we first start out, we get really starry-eyed with all of these big names, these mega corporations, and we just kind of look the other way when a small business reaches out wanting to partner with us. And so, yeah, I just try to remember that I'm a small business too. I want to help small businesses. So I definitely kept a lot of small businesses on that original list.
I like how you bring up the things that you're already using, because it helps you kind of stay aligned and then you don't have to overthink things. When it comes to the idea of creating content like for brands versus just making stuff for yourself, and I'm pretty sure I've seen one of your videos as well on this topic, like about maybe the specific video was one of your TikToks, but either way, the idea of like coming up with a niche, right? So that's a buzzword that I don't think we've talked about this show in a few episodes. It used to come up every episode, but we haven't been talking like, YouTube and brand deals as much recently. So now that we are, when it comes to figuring that out, what was that struggle like for you?
So for me, it was a struggle that I didn't have right out of the gate because I started really strictly as a natural hair blogger. I showed up online originally to document my journey, share resources with others, share natural hair products with others. So I started right away with a very, very, very narrow niche, and I attracted brands in that niche accordingly, which is why I always say to people, there's beauty and there's strength in the niche because you can be extremely small, but brands will still want to work with you because you're so specific. Your audience is coming to you for something so specific. You're like the go-to person on that topic. That being said, the struggle for me came as I started to grow, and I think a lot of creators feel this restlessness, and it's something I definitely felt, where you start thinking, well, I'm such a multifaceted person. I'm multi-passionate. I want to create about all of the things. Like, why can't I just do it all? And I think we can, to an extent. Like, I think we hear a lot of people talking right now about the idea that you are the niche. Become the niche, be your own brand, and you can create anything you want. And I think that that is only true when you become known for something specific first. So I now am in a place where I'm still not a big creator. I have like 17,000 followers on the platform that pays my bills, Instagram. And I feel so incredibly lucky to create for so many different brands. I do skincare, beauty, hair care, yes, but I've been able to work with lifestyle brands. I had a gig with like Pine Sol and Clorox, and I do food, and I do all of these like really random topics that make people think like, oh wow, she doesn't need a niche, how cool. But I think it's because I built my initial community around a really specific topic. They were hanging out with me for years and they trusted me. So when I started talking about other things, that trust was still there. I think if I came out right out the gate being like, I'm doing everything, I think that my audience and brands would also be like, I don't know what you're doing, and I don't know what I would pay you for, because the thing is, brands all have a target audience. And when they're reaching out to influencers, they want to tap into your audience that hopefully aligns with their target demographic. But if you don't have a clear audience, you don't have a clear target demographic or niche, then the brand is not going to know whether or not you align with them. They're going to choose somebody that is creating for people more specifically in their audience avatar.
Yeah, it's a really fun topic, but could be a stressful topic too. I'm currently going through some growing pains with my own creator journey at this exact moment, because I'm not even kidding. I'm sure some people will feel the pain and be able to relate, but I had 2 TikToks, 2 YouTubes, 2 Instagrams, literally 2 Pinterests, 2 LinkedIn's.
You're my type of person.
Is that a good thing?
Arguably not, but I am in the same boat. I have 2 blogs, 2 YouTube channels. I have 2 of everything too. I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, and so I'm trying, because I do know that there's wisdom in becoming more of a singular brand long term, but it's interesting to tease out and kind of figure out, because I always felt like I was just confusing things if I didn't keep things separate. But then there starts being so much overlap that it's like I always had one for me and very personal brandy stuff and one for the podcast. And then it was like, oh, I'll create this piece of content. And then you're sitting there being like, I don't even know what channel this goes on at this point. And completely ruined my YouTube channel. And it's all stuff that I share, not in like a woe is me way, is in a way of showcasing for people the real, like, build in public, like the reality of going through all this. I feel like it's getting to a pretty darn good point now where most platforms are one, but on YouTube, I need them to be separate. Like that's kind of where it's heading. But my profile picture on my main Instagram feed is literally the letters of the alphabet JKL that stand for the show. That's not really good for a personal brand. So I need like a picture of me with a hat that says JKL on it or something. And
Yes.
I'm just working towards figuring that out like as we speak right now. So it's hilarious too.
I completely relate to that. So a whole other layer to my online presence is that yes, I'm a hair, beauty, lifestyle creator, and I'm grateful to be able to create in all of these niches. But I also share tips for content creators. So you mentioned my you mentioned my YouTube channel. That is actually a whole separate online brand. And I had to learn the hard way that I probably needed two separate online brands because I had a couple videos go viral on TikTok and Instagram on my hair, beauty, lifestyle page where I was talking about how much money I made as a content creator. This brought in an influx of followers. I grew from 5,000 followers on TikTok to 60,000 in the course of a couple days. And now I had 55,000 new people who didn't care at all about my hair stuff, didn't care at all about my beauty stuff, and they only wanted to know how do you make it as a content creator. And I tried for a while. I tried to keep it all there. I tried to create a content strategy that, every other day was going to be a content creating tip. Every other day between that, I was going to talk about hair and beauty. And I had to eventually accept that those target audiences were too distinct for me to keep creating content on one page. So I took the dive. I fully separated everything. I only recently separated my Instagram because I was holding on to that one. I told myself that my Instagram was a place that was truly me. So I should be able to share all aspects of myself there, including the content creating tips. But it ultimately tanked my engagement because people who signed up for one thing weren't getting served what they wanted. They wouldn't engage with it. Instagram wouldn't show it to them anymore. And they just became like these ghost followers. And so I finally split it all. And I think for me, this really works, but I don't think it's necessarily advice everybody has to follow. I think they just have to really look at their target audience and how much overlap is there truly. Because if my tips were truly just for maybe aspiring influencers, like people only wanting to get into the beauty space, then maybe they could have lived on the same platform. But I like to speak to kind of a wider group of creators, all ages, all genders. Like it's truly for anybody wanting to become a creator. And those people aren't going to want the hair, beauty, lifestyle content. So for me, it made sense to split, but it's not always going to be the case for everybody.
Meanwhile, I just shared that I think I'm headed in the opposite direction.
Yes, but that's okay. I think it sounds like you kind of have this. It sounds as though you have a shared audience amongst these two platforms, and I think the cool thing about a podcast is that people are also here for, yes, your guests and the stories you're sharing, but they're also here for you. So I think that there is a lot of value in having it all in one place because it's you and your personality kind of carrying a lot.
I think so. It's also part of it for me, and I think it was Josh Spector that I heard on a podcast recently, on the Creators on Air podcast. I heard his episode recently, and he said something that kind of got my back up, but also made me think a little bit. And it was the idea that look, he's successful and he only really creates on Twitter. And that's it. Like the idea of just simplifying your life by having the one platform. Episode 2 of our show, David Speed UK, he was like, I think you have to plant flags everywhere, but have your like go-to platform. So there's all these kind of, like different opinions. And then you have the Gary V's who like have the ability to outsource a lot of content creation and you can create high quality stuff everywhere. So for me, and I know that I'm kind of preaching to the same audience here, exactly what I'm talking about. It was figuring out like, well, how much quality can I create at multiple platforms? So do I have 2 or whatever? But for me, most importantly, a big part of it is alignment with like my life goals. I could die tomorrow, and then what am I leaving behind for my daughters in terms of content is a big way that I think about when I'm making stuff. And for me, like hands down, if you asked me like heart of hearts, you're my life coach, I'd be like, well, that'd be making like really good YouTube videos that leaves life lessons about learning things and content creation so that you could go succeed. You don't have to go get all the snake oil and gurus to teach you, like, here are all the secrets. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's really non-existent as is. So, and the reason was because it was too hard to kind of figure out both. So the funny thing is, the long-winded summary of this is that on YouTube, I think it really needs to be separate for me, but everywhere else, I just need to declutter and just keep it together.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I love that outlook. And I think that what you said about being able to actually be present and post quality everywhere, I think is the ultimate struggle. And any way that you can not dilute that quality, like if you have to bring things together to be able to show up as your best, then I think that's the best.
And one of the examples for me, because it was like the brand concept that like I struggled with, right? I'm sure there's tons, but the Bird's Papaya comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's not a name.
Yeah.
And it's more poetic than just keep learning. But again, it's still like a brand name. But then really that she became known as a person within that brand name, And so I think that's kind of the direction that I'm headed with that piece. But like I said, on the YouTube, it's all these podcast episodes that get 0 views and 7 views. And even big shows just audio podcasts on YouTube, people don't really tune in to listen on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a video platform. So separating those is where, for me, that's where the value will be, because I can slowly, patiently grow the other one with 2 quality videos a month or 1 quality video a week, and I don't have to worry about anything. But on Instagram, to your point, I was like, okay, I'm creating a story, and it's like, again, I'm like, what what account am I on? I sometimes have to look at the bottom of my phone to even remember what account I'm on. And so it's fighting that fight. Now, all this to say, Instagram is kind of one of the main platforms that you operate. I feel like this is refreshing because it hasn't been talked about it as much since YouTube launched Shorts, since TikTok kind of went viral as a company. So when it comes to creating that really good Instagram profile where brands are going to want to work with you, or like frequency, how much time do you spend creating there? What is your workflow? Do you post X number of stories a day? Are you thoughtful about stories? So like the master class on Instagram would be a really cool mini blog post right now, I think.
Yes. So I would love to say that I approach everything, I sit down Monday and plan out everything and I've got my stories ready to go. I know a lot of people who are like that, but I don't have the attention span for that. But I think where Instagram still has a leg up on these other platforms is that community is still first. So I often say when you post to Instagram, even when the algorithms are acting a mess, it's going to serve it to people who have followed you. Whereas on TikTok, your goal is kind of to get on the For You page. You're trying to get in front of people who don't know you yet, don't trust you yet, and you're trying to like hook them really quick, get their attention, like say don't leave. Whereas posting on Instagram, you're kind of in a bit of a safe bubble with your people. And you already have that trust and rapport going. So on Instagram, I truly, truly think like that community focus is key. I try really hard in every post to include information about myself. I am kind of that old school Instagrammer in the sense that my captions are usually massive. Yes, not everybody's reading them, but my community is reading them. And you can usually tell that by the comments. People are commenting on something that is like 6 paragraphs deep into the caption, and it actually resonated with them. So while I'm not necessarily posting in extremely strict cadence, I am making sure that I am showing up regularly and showing up with a piece of myself. I noticed that when I do just kind of like the little fun aesthetic content, it doesn't usually perform as well as something where I'm getting really vulnerable and serious in the caption, or even goofy, but I'm sharing a lot of me there. And stories, same sort of thing. I found that my story performance skyrocketed when I stopped overthinking it. I stopped wearing makeup. I started showing up in like my robes and my hair a mess and just sharing what was on my mind. And from like a technical standpoint, I always try to make sure that I have captions on screen, and I always kind of have a little header at the top at the start of my story rant so people know what they're buckling up for. But for the most part, Instagram people are just still looking to connect. They're looking to be inspired and motivated, but they are still kind of looking for that person behind it, which is why a lot of people on Instagram can get these incredible brand deals without a massive following. I find on TikTok, to be able to get really solid brand deals, you have to have a larger following count, because it's also technically easier to get more followers there. Your potential reach is massive there when you hit a For You page, but are those people connected with you? Are they trusting you? Or are they just, you saw them, or they saw you on their For You page, they hit the subscribe really quick in the corner and then just move along? I feel like we hear that story a lot about VidCon a couple years ago, where there was a number of TikTok stars in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of follower range that had set up meet and greets and nobody was there to see them. And I think that that example is used very often to just highlight how TikTok is this very shallow, not in this sense that the content is shallow, because I think there's so much value there, but shallow in the sense that it's hard to go deep with people. You're not usually getting content served in order. Like if you get a story time, you might be getting like part 3 of 7 when it arrives on your feed. Whereas on Instagram, you're kind of more likely to be following people's journey a bit closer to the time that they posted it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the ability to tap into their stories and see their day-to-day. Yes, TikTok has stories, but it's not kind of front and center in that sense that it is on Instagram.
I'd love to ask kind of rapid fire some of the silly questions that people bring up with Instagram. Like,
yes,
what is a current, like, how do you think of hashtags right now, for example?
Yes, so I say hashtags are not what they used to. They're not going to help you get in front of a new audience or anything like that. But I still swear by hashtags for getting on brands' radars, because I think users aren't scrolling through them anymore looking to find new people, but brands are looking at hashtag lifestyle influencer, hashtag Vancouver influencer, hashtag Canadian blogger to find people to work with. So if you're a creator looking to get on somebody's radar in the industry, still definitely prioritize hashtags and focus on the demographic, but don't necessarily use them trying to get in front of a wider audience.
There's probably only 14 of them, but hashtag Canadian podcaster, I should use that someday.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Hashtag Canadian creator, hashtag Canadian creatives, like just play around, because I found that when I started doing that, brands started reaching out, I started getting invited to events, like things just started to snowball because agencies and brands are scouring those.
That makes complete sense, and I don't know that anyone's ever said that part of the hashtag piece on this show, so that's really awesome. What about aesthetics of your feed? Like, is that a stress these days? Is that gone?
It is not the same way it used to be. I'm full millennial, and I know that growing up on Instagram, it was all about the aesthetic feed. It was about your top 9, making sure it balanced out, and it's not that deep anymore. That being said, I think it's still important to look at your page and make sure that it truly reflects you, to make sure that it's kind of a portfolio of what you can do. You're showing to brands what you're capable of. You're showing to your audience what you're like. So you still want to make sure it has that high quality, but it doesn't need to be that perfect checkered grid or that aesthetic. You're not trying to balance everything out in the same way we used to like 10 years ago.
I'll preface this one first by saying with all of these topics, it's so interesting because even if you go ask Mark Zuckerberg, he doesn't know what's right or wrong. It's like when they launched Threads, they just kind of like start polling the audience for different, like they're doing the exact same things we are talking about as online business creators, like going to your audience and trying to figure out what works for them. And they don't really know what helps or doesn't help. And so there's two other things I think that are worthwhile mentioning. When you were referring to creating for brands, and you mentioned that you primarily create reels, but do you make, when you said like I make sure I show up every couple of days, is that sometimes static posts as well, or is it only reels?
To leverage all the different formats that the platform has to offer. So I'll do everything from a static post to a carousel post to reels. Ironically, something I have noticed in the past month as I've been studying my analytics is that my audience doesn't actually resonate with reels as much as they used to. I will post a reel and it's like struggling to get views, whereas I'll post a carousel and people are eating it up. So I think, kind of to your point, we have to be listening to our audience, not necessarily all of these different hacks and advice that's out there. I don't know. I'm a firm believer of, using everything that the platform's giving you. Our audience will tell us by how they're engaging with our content.
On this show, I feel like whenever we log off, people are DMing me or we're, running into each other online or offline like a few months later and being like, I wish we talked about this or that. We never have enough time on this show because it's not going to be like Joe Rogan 3 hours. It's,
yes.
We keep it around an hour. And I have like a ton of things that I think you've become an expert in over the years and are really, good at sharing on things. Pinterest is one of those things. And maybe we can talk about that later if we run out of time today, because I feel like the other thing was blogging in general. Like you talked about that, getting your start and how you like to nerd out a little bit with SEO still.
Yeah.
I can really relate to that. I do feel like for a lot of people, it's kind of an art of the past, sort of. Why do you still maintain a blog? And I guess like how much do you still blog and stuff when you're so busy creating video content?
Yeah, so I still 1000% believe in the power of blogging, but I will admit, exactly like you said, I feel like it does fall to the wayside when I'm focusing on the social content or brand deals, everything that is just so much short form focused. But why I still focus on it is because I think it is one corner of the internet that I own. I can control how I show up on it. I can control how much content I'm putting up. I'm not constrained by word count or photo limits or anything like that. I can truly express myself as I wish. And from the business perspective, it has just so much great potential to reach people for the long term. So I still have people reading blog posts that I posted 3-4 years ago. It's got some affiliate links I tossed in there. It makes a couple bucks a day. It's nothing crazy, but those add up with time. And I also have ads on the sides, which some people might say is annoying, but it also brings me, a couple $100 a month. So it's a nice kind of passive income source, even when I'm not focusing on it as much as I should. Like I just posted a blog post today. My last one on my hair, beauty, lifestyle brand was in May, but we're doing our best. And a third side to it is that it makes me as a creator seem a lot more professional. So I don't necessarily have the biggest follower count in the world, but I have a website. I have a place that people can find me. I understand SEO. I have an about section. I should probably put up some testimonials and media placements and podcast interviews and all of that. That's on my to-do list. But a lot of brands and media outlets are still using Google. So I have got so many incredible opportunities just by having a website. The one I bring up often is that I got to work with Google and speak at VidCon Abu Dhabi and VidCon US, simply because they were looking for people who were still blogging, and who knows what they typed in, but my website popped up. So I think that it's just a great way for creators to have a leg up in this space that is so oversaturated.
Yeah, there's always a moment on this show too where I kind of end up reflecting more than really having a lot of input on a topic. And this is one of them, because I completely agree with the value of blogging still. And I often feel like I wish I was doing it even more.
Yes.
So I'm like sitting here thinking about how could I continue to blog even more, as well as juggling everything, which is another really good thing to point out. I'm sure there are ups and downs with balancing so many things. Like, we didn't talk about the YouTube channel, didn't talk about Pinterest. Why is it that you juggle so many things as opposed to like just having that one Instagram page and the blog and that's it?
I think twofold. One, it's a bit of that like multi-passionate part of me where I find that every platform has a different way of expressing the content that you're putting on it. It has different audiences. Like, I feel like I get to really tap into so many different aspects of creativity by having all of these different platforms. And I think, again, it's that level of, okay, she's a brand, she's approaching this as a business. She has, I think, like you said earlier, kind of staked a flag in all of these different corners of the internet. And I think that it just has helped with the perception of the creator that I am. Of course, I think the absolute hardest part is just being present on all of them. I am the first to admit that I can't be everywhere at once. You can usually tell where my focus has been by just like where the posts have been popping up lately. I did actually recently outsource some help because, like you said, I've been focusing so much on YouTube for my Creating with Kaya brand where I share the tips. I have sought out help transcribing those YouTube videos into blog posts so that I can be more present there. And it's still my information, it's still my tips. I still go over everything and make sure it's in my own words and, you know, is reflective of my brand. But it's something kind of easy to help me stay present. And I'm hoping to eventually do that for the lifestyle brand and try to figure out these different aspects of repurposing and repackaging so it doesn't feel like I'm reinventing the wheel every time I need a post on a new platform.
I'm looking forward to more YouTube content, but I don't want to put pressure on you to make it. I just love seeing people. I have a bias towards people building YouTube channels for some reason.
I love YouTube.
I love that vibe. So one of those things that if we run this back and do an episode 2 down the line, we could definitely talk about vlogging. Now that we've talked a fair bit about blogging, you know, we could talk about Pinterest. And I think those ideas of building out some systems and automation and workflow and how do you go from, okay, I'm a creator, I'm starting to monetize, but how do you make it a business that's a little more sustainable for your life and for our sanity? But before we go away from blogging, is there anything for someone who is about to be a blogger? Like, it can be a stressful space thinking of keywords and headings and images and kind of what that means. What are some things for people who are listening to all this and being like, yeah, I still would like to blog too, that they should probably know as they try and not just create a post that nobody ever sees?
Yes. So the first thing I say is definitely take the time to do a little bit of research about SEO. You don't need to go incredibly deep. All you really have to understand is that in order for Google to serve your content to the people that are looking for it, you need to have the words that the people might be typing into Google in your blog post. Like, I think that's kind of the absolute core of SEO. We can get so nitty gritty, but if you are wanting your content to surface in front of people, you have to really put yourself in their shoes and think, what would they be typing to want to find this post? And there's a lot of great tools out there. I use Key Search to help me do keyword research, and it's basically just typing a lot of synonyms in and seeing which ones it predicts will rank well for me. And I also use Yoast, which is a plugin to kind of help analyze my blog posts. But the second part, once you've wrapped your head around SEO, just start, because blog posts are editable. Like, you can go back and audit it whenever. Like, I look back at some of my early blog posts and they were truly just like a diary. There was no SEO. Like, nobody but my dad was reading it. Like, wasn't great. But I was able to then go back once I had learned more about SEO and just tweak them. I was able to add some keywords here and there. I added some pictures and made sure that I had included the keywords in the alt text. Like, I went back and audited my blog posts, and then boom, they started performing well on Google. So I think that it's really easy to get caught up and frozen when we think about blogs, because there's so much to do. But just do the research and then start. And then as you learn more, you can go back and edit. And that's kind of, again, the beauty of blogs, because you can't do that with Instagram and TikTok. You can't give it that new life again. Whereas blogs, you can keep doing that until the content hits.
Change the titles to 2024.
Absolutely. Been there. Been there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So maybe in terms of those other topics, like, this always happens because, again, you have a wealth of knowledge. There's so many ways that you bring value to audiences, and we could create a whole bunch of little mini master classes on these creator topics. But if we were to create kind of like a teaser for a future episode that touches on one or both of the things that you feel are important to think about when it comes to YouTube and Pinterest, like, maybe what do you like about each of those, or why do you think people should use each of those?
Yeah.
And then we can kind of leave it at that.
Of course. So YouTube, first and foremost, I love it because in my mind, it's just a visual version of blogs. It's long form content. You have that room to express yourself and play, and it's evergreen. It can reach people years after you've posted it, and you can leverage SEO to try to get your content in front of a targeted audience. So for me, it just makes perfect sense. Blogs and YouTube, like, they go hand in hand. You can repurpose them. You can double post. You can post a YouTube video in a blog post. Like, it's perfection. And Pinterest, I absolutely love. It's so underrated. It is, again, I think there's a theme with me. Pinterest is evergreen. It is search engine optimized. I think people don't realize that Pinterest is basically just a visual-based Google. People are using it primarily to seek out inspiration for specific projects, for how-tos. People are using Pinterest for specific search intents. It's very rare that people are just opening up Pinterest the way they would Instagram and be like, ooh, what am I going to find today? They open it with a purpose. And as creators, we can capitalize on that by creating content that meets them, where we can create content that matches what they're looking for.
So do you use Pinterest more as its own social platform for yourself these days, or are you driving traffic from Pinterest to your blog or from Pinterest to Instagram? What's the benefit for you?
For me, Pinterest is my second biggest traffic driver. It rivals Google with the traffic that it sends to my blog. I have also used it to drive traffic to YouTube videos, but my meta strategy for that is actually making a blog post, embedding the YouTube video in the blog post, and then making a Pinterest pin that drives traffic to said blog post. So I can kind of get the best of all the worlds.
One of the only pieces of content I've ever had go viral was on Pinterest. Mm-hmm. And that was a long time ago too. I'm also a reasonably large is not a word at all. I don't have a lot of money invested in general, but of my consumer stocks that I own, Pinterest is one of the biggest. So.
Same here. I believe in it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, so I'm a fan too. Like I said, we could go deeper, kind of like what we did with Instagram, something maybe in the future, but I at least wanted to touch on them quickly. AI is another thing that comes to mind. But with all of these things, I feel like we did a lot of tactical, practical today, which is really important. I feel like a lot of podcasts don't do enough of that when people are tuning in to be like, hey, this person has grown an awesome brand and they've figured out content creation and how to make their first 70K as a quote unquote small influencer. Like, I want to learn how to. So they're kind of hanging on that how to stuff, and it's easy for us to gloss over it as experts. So I appreciate you sharing that style of content. I would like to also ask a little more of a life type question, and that's how you are able to balance it all, like have that foundation of self-care and wellness and, personal relationships, because it can't be super easy when it comes to being able to maintain all of this brand growth as well. So how do you deal with that challenge?
I am very candid with the fact that it is an ongoing process. I think that my personality is to like hyper focus on things. I will be that person sitting at my computer desk, forgetting to eat, forgetting to drink water. My husband comes and is like putting stuff in front of me. It's like, please take care of yourself. That being said, I think that it has started with an aspect of awareness, because I have definitely faced burnout before, and I've had to kind of reflect at what drove me there, and it was definitely like that just unhealthy, hyper-focused mentality. So part of how I navigate it is knowing that it's happening so that I can try my best to take breaks, force myself to take breaks, make sure I am taking care of myself. And also a huge, huge, huge one has been seeking out my community. I have been able to build out an incredible community online and even more impactful in person. I've made a lot of Vancouver-based creator friends that I can go co-work with, that we can just hang out and do non-related work things with, but they still understand this world. And I have found that A, it forces me to get out of the house, and B, it just helps me step back, see perspective, talk to other people who are going through similar things, and just know I'm not alone in navigating it. And those are usually the people too that are also pushing me to say, hey, the YouTube video can wait. Yes, consistency is important, but it's okay if you take a break. The world's not going to end. And it's nice to have people who actually get it and are doing it say that, versus maybe, somebody else that you love in your life telling you that you can take a break. You're like, no, you don't understand. Everything's riding on this. So that's been so helpful.
That's really well put. One of my mentors wants me basically putting out a podcast episode, a calendar weekday, right? Whether it could be an interview or it could just be a 5-minute solo episode, but either way, one out daily. And I've always thought that strategy is awesome. It's nice to have that sort of routine and habit built in, where it's like check the box each day that it's created. But when I tried to do it just for the sake of checking the box, I found that I know that quality is kind of up to the listener, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, no, it's just not like work that I even want to put out. So it was trying to figure out the balance between art and sort of systems, I guess, is really tricky. So I completely agree with what you're saying, because if my wife or my dad were to say, it's okay, the podcast can wait.
You're like, what?
Yeah. I'm like, no, it's everything's riding on this. But I am, I suppose, appreciative of, what I said earlier about I could die tomorrow, and then what does this matter anyway? So I might as well go mix in a nap or drink some water. And on the same of that is, when we first start creating, I think we consume a lot, and I'll never watch all of the YouTube videos that are on my watch later list. I'll never read all the books that I want to read.
Yes.
As a consumer, it's so similar too. I'll never create all the videos that I have on my ideas list, because it's at 1,000 now. And I'll never make all the, paintings I want to make or podcast episodes. So that could be scary, but to me, it's now somewhat freeing. And in the past after this episode, because it's 11 p.m. my time, I would have like stayed up for the next few hours, super inspired, which I still am inspired, but I'd like make sure I get a blog post out now or get this edited or something.
Yeah.
And I think I will probably go to bed.
Yeah. It's healthy. It's so healthy, but it's hard to get there.
It is. It's very tough, but I can appreciate it a lot. I feel like you already said it, that having a community to lean on helps a lot. If you ever even one DM here or there brings value to you, please do just reach out, because I know that really, really helps all of us. And that's come up a lot of times on this show. I'd love to rattle off the kind of rapid fire questions that I theme all these episodes with. But before I do, since it'll probably be a little while until we create again, on any of these topics or otherwise, is there anything that you'd feel we'd be leaving out if we didn't touch on, or that comes to mind?
I think the only thing is that the two things that usually hold creators back from being successful, it's usually two extremes. One is that they are just so stuck in the research phase and they're consuming all the podcasts, they're watching all the YouTube videos, and they just never feel like they're ready. And if that's you, you need to just go do it. Go start, because you're only going to learn from your mistakes, and you have to start making those mistakes as soon as possible. And the other side, I think, are the people who want to do the thing, but have not even started researching or navigating it. They're just kind of like, how? And hoping it falls in their lap. And I see that a lot on my feed when I post something, and I'll have like all of these links in the description for context, and somebody's just like asking the question in the comments and didn't kind of do their own research or kind of have that initiative. And I think a huge reality of any type of self-employment or entrepreneurship is that sort of initiative and being able to seek out your own answers as well. So kind of figure out which one of those is holding you back and then act accordingly.
I love that you went there, because one of the things that I really try and share a lot about is this idea of helping the new creator. That's not as common to see on socials, because I feel like a lot of creators are quite a bit far removed from that. So they're not necessarily creating for the true beginner. They're almost like creating for the people who are kind of already leveled up enough to talk about specific editing techniques or scaling their online course or something. And it's like, yeah, but what about the person that doesn't even know if they want to create a podcast, a YouTube channel, or a blog yet? You know, do they like audio, writing, and video? And they're still stuck there trying to figure out how to get started, and that's going to take 24 months. You just spoke to those two kind of groups of people. So I really do appreciate that, because that's often who I'm trying to help. The funny thing is, it'd be easy to coach them, because in 5 seconds in a DM, you can be like, just make something and publish it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Just do it. Obviously, so much easier said than done, but I think it's what holds so many people back is that fear.
Important to say it, because someone will be listening being like, yep, that's me. I'm going to go post my first video right now. And you brought up the idea of self-learning. That brings this episode full circle, because in one of the first questions we talked about was that. That's another thing that I feel like we could go a lot deeper on, because the how to self-learn is another super meta topic that obviously you're great at. So we'll have plenty to talk about someday in the future. But that is the first theme question, coincidentally, and it's something could be on brand to this stuff or entirely separate, but just something that you are learning right now.
Not something that I'm actively learning, but something I'm about to start. I got to take my own advice. I got really into the idea of bookbinding. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it or not, but it's been on my TikTok For You page, like people learning how to fully bind like their own hardcover books of like books that they love. And I think that I would love to try that. So random.
Define that a little better for me. Like, so are you writing a book and then binding it? And so, how many copies could you make?
So this could go like in a completely random direction, but I recently um, dove into fan fiction. I've never read it in my life, and something popped up on my feed, and I was like, I'll give it a try. And it opened this door of all these people who were binding their favorite fan fiction books because you can't legally buy them, like people can't sell them. And so what people would do is if they loved it, they would just print it out and with normal printer paper, but then you get all of this other fancy equipment. I don't really understand it. And with cardboard or who knows what, at the end, it fully looks like a book you could have purchased from a bookstore or the hardcover. And I just have this dream of like, one day, even if my own stories don't get published, how cool would it be to print and bind my own stories?
Very cool, especially if it was like super exclusive, like, and you did like 25 copies, but the rest of it was like audio only.
Yes. Yeah.
That'd be interesting. And then
I don't know how long it takes, but yeah, exactly. You got to build the hype around it first. We got to work backwards these days.
For sure. That's awesome. That's something really cool. Sounds like you should make a YouTube video about it.
I think I might.
One piece of advice, if you're able to leave just one piece of advice back for the next generation, what would that be?
My piece of advice is try your best to not get too stressed out because you will live many lives. It's something I've learned. Coming out of high school, I thought I was going to be a professional dancer. That didn't work. I'm like, I'm going to be a professional writer. That didn't work. I worked my way up in retail. I worked a traditional 9-to-5, and now here I am as a full-time content creator. And I have no idea what the next life is going to be after this, but I think it's so easy to kind of get stressed out on the here and now and the venture that we're focused on. And we think if we don't make it, that's the end. And just kind of trust and have faith that there will be so many new lives, so many new journeys, so many new people coming into your life, so many new adventures. And I think that's kind of the beauty of being human. We don't have to do one thing forever. We can reinvent ourselves over and over and over again. And not just we can, we probably will. That's just how life works.
Yeah, and if we don't, life might reinvent things for us sometimes.
That's the truth.
Might as well try and take the driver's seat. Speaking of which, you can take the mic because the last one is just if you were to ask me a question, whether on these topics or otherwise as well, like what's a question that comes to mind that you would ask me?
Yeah, so something that popped into my head was, do you feel as though you have built up a community doing this career path? And if so, how did you build it? Like, what were some of the fundamental things that you did to build this sense of community around what you do?
That's one of my biggest goals long term, is to build a community, paid or otherwise. I'm kind of like a nerd when it comes to the non-paid stuff and then scaling the unscalable like so ridiculously because I think it's just worth it. And so I would love to have like a circle, like the app, the community, the community builder. It's like courses, but community circle. I think I'd love to have that because I like the clean interface of it, but it's still kind of owned like your own site. But I would love to have it be free. Maybe it'll be paid. So in terms of those formal communities, like that's one of my long-term goals. But I started that as my very first thing to try in terms of a monetization strategy. And that's something I would not recommend people doing unless they have a niche.
Fair.
Not that it was super negative, but it'd probably be off topic but there was pros and cons for sure. And the people who were in it were amazing. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated doing it, but it was a lot of work for a small amount of like reward in terms of the finances, the economics of building out a business. Mm-hmm. But in terms of a community around the podcast itself and around the lifelong learning aspects, I feel like across socials, there's a pretty good vibe for the brand. Just keep learning that when people do something in a growth mindset way, they'll use the hashtag, they'll the odd time share it to a story where then I can reshare it. On Facebook, same kind of thing. People will make the odd post where they share, in kind of like a cliche way, like taking up painting, and then they'll mention the show or something like that. So I feel like it's coming along, but it could be a lot better. I also feel like. So how I've done it so far is really trying to just model lifelong learning moments, but not just necessarily because I've done them. Like that's my goal with YouTube, is to learn how to sing. Like, I'm super scared to try singing, but I'm going to try it and we're going to see what happens and post it. So really putting that growth mindset at the forefront of the content, but just trying to find other people learning things new and resharing them as much as I can in stories and stuff like that.
I like that.
I feel like that's been really helpful. But having a clear space for people to formally gather as a community, I find that one of the biggest challenges with social media in general. And I don't think that I've done a good job of that.
Oh, I love that insight. It's so cool. And I'm with you on that being kind of my one day dream of a place that people can gather. I know that if I were to execute that right now, it would not, I don't think it would work out. But I do feel like I have very much like a virtual sense of community around the stuff that I do online. So I love that. That was really insightful.
I think, thank you. I think with the business piece, like, I'm part of Pat Flynn's like SPI, like Smart Passive Income. Even somebody with as huge of a platform as he has, and he has strengths in all those, in basically every online business area. Like, that's the way he approached this, was like, I'm going to learn about course creation. I'm going to learn about podcasting. I'm going to learn about YouTube. I'm going to master them all so that I can have a membership that's like for business creators. Even that, being in there and having a firsthand view of it, I'd love to hear his opinion when he comes on the show, but it feels like a little bit broad because like someone will post something and 0 people will reply, and those kinds of things. It's not like a very busy place. People probably don't log in for like months at a time. I'm sure if I could see the back end like data. And that's kind of one of my worries of creating that, where that stuff would be really cool to have people talking to each other. It doesn't even happen with such a huge platform like that. Whereas, like in your case, I do feel like that membership, if it was niche, would probably just crush. Like, it would be even a lot more engaging than someone like Pat Flynn's or Gary V's, because like if it was like very specific to like hair care or something, or even something in the creator world. But like in the creator world, I feel like something like photography or how to grow your really Instagram. Specific. Like, I do feel like that's where specifics help, but I don't want to do that.
Relatable. Yeah, I think back to, I know a lot of them have died, and I had tried my hat at it, but I think at a lot of the like Facebook groups, there are some incredible Facebook groups out there that people are just so engaged, so tuned in. And I think you are right. Like, it is often because they came together around something so specific, and their conversations might actually be quite broad, but it's that specificity that like brought them all there. And they know, at least above all, they still have all that in common. So yeah, no, it's great food for thought.
Yeah, like nutrition for bodybuilders, all of a sudden you're talking about The Bachelor. But to your point, that entry that brought everyone together was that initial thing. It's definitely what I struggle with as a very broad, like, Diary of a CEO and, like these kinds of shows that are so broad. Like, to me, it's worth it. That's what I want to create, even if it takes, a couple of years longer. But finding those ways where, like, at least in one way, I could help people be like better interviewers for podcasting or something, or how to script your solo podcast episodes. And I think that would do well.
Yeah, so true.
And that's what's funny, but when I think membership, I think, no, we're going to be in there talking about YouTube and blogging and podcasting and that kind of more broad topic. So I appreciate the question. And the last one is why, and then where people can find your work if they want to go support you online.
You say why? Or yeah, like what for? Okay.
It's a tricky little wrinkle in that
I love
question.
it. So if people are looking for natural hair content, skincare, lifestyle content through the lens of somebody who's pretty low maintenance, very chill, really comfy, you can find me anywhere on the internet under Comfy Girl Curls. But if you want to chat with me, Instagram's probably the best. And if you want content creator tips, figuring out how to navigate brand deals, or just want to hear about some of the weird realities and rants of this crazy life, you can find me on Creating with Kaya, and I'm primarily sharing that content over on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, I hope tonight you have a super productive or really relaxed evening, or whatever the balance is that you need tonight.
I appreciate it. I think I am gonna just chill out. Yeah, it's gonna be great. You inspired me on that.
What a great way to end the day for both of us, and then be super productive tomorrow. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me. Such a blast.
End scene.
Oh, really appreciate it.
JKL listeners, thank you so much for being here. We're having just such a blast making these interviews. We just recorded 8 this week alone. Super excited for what's to come. And it would mean the world if you pass the show along to friends or family that you think might also benefit. We've been getting more and more questions and comments, DMs about the show, requests for guests, follow-up questions, content that we can create. And this is what the big dream was all about. Appreciate you so much. And thank you to our guest today, Kaya. She's one of those creators that I could easily create a daily show with. She likes to give back, and there is so much power in her message and teachings that really could change your own life if you apply them. But just as important, she's generous, fun, and entertaining throughout the process.